Hey guys, Marsengan here, bringing you another Dragon Ball Z Dokkan battle video. And so we saw in the news recently that we are getting a new stage of Super Battle Road dropping, which is going to be stage 65 for global space traveling warriors. So we'll be doing a team building guide for this stage. As always with my team building guides, I'll go over my top picks and honourable mentions for units that will be good in this event. If there's any units you think I miss out or should talk more about why they would be good for this stage, maybe I missed out one of the parts of the unit that makes them super useful, let me know down below in the comment section. And obviously if you find the guide helpful at all, do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So the first thing you have to bear in mind is the enemies in the event, right? So the first fight is 5 enemies, it's all of the Kais, and they are all super types. Then you have the second fight is 4 enemies, Barbody, Dabura and the minions, they are all extreme. And then the final fight is just against Kid Buu, who is extreme AGL. So remember with these stages, when you have one enemy at the end, something that's going to be very, very useful for these fights is if you bring units that can stun. Because if you have multiple units that can stun and you get the stun off, like especially in the first turn, you can pretty much have the entire fight locked down if your units then continue to actually hit their stuns against one enemy, then they just can't do anything. So that is something to bear in mind. So Space Traveling Warriors is a very big category, as you can see, and there are quite a few different sub-teams that you can build. So those are the main things I'm going to highlight. Like, there are a ton of units that I could talk about, but we're going to talk about some of the actual team structures that will be the most useful. So starting off, we obviously have STR Bojack as the straight up Space Traveling Warriors leader. If you use him, then obviously you can use any other units on the category, so you don't have to worry about any sort of synergy with the leader skill. And he is a Space Traveling Warriors support unit as well, so you can just float him off and have him there supporting the rotation. He does raise his defense on super, so he's obviously aged a bit now, so if you're going for a no item run, like, he won't be tanking attacks super well and will probably just straight up die to a super, but he certainly can be very useful on the team with the support and that all-encompassing leader skill. So next up we have our boy LR Final Form Cooler. Now obviously his leader skill, Terrifying Conquerors or Movie Bosses, that covers a lot of units that are on Space Traveling Warriors, and then he gives the extra 30% to Transformation Boost, which again under his lead there are quite a few units that you'll be able to run for this stage that get the full 200% leader skill. One thing to bear in mind, however, is that for some reason, even though they come to Earth on a spaceship to fight Goku, the Golden Freezers are not on Space Traveling Warriors, and they are usually the best options for slot 1 tanks for Cooler's team, so you're not going to be able to use them. Cooler himself, obviously not a very good slot 1 unit, but if the RNG goes your way in slot 2 or 3, he can go off with a ton of supers, put out an absolute ridiculous amount of damage, and clear out enemies basically all by himself. So very, very powerful unit. Obviously then we have his faithful sidekick, the Easy A STR Cooler. He also leads Terrifying Conquerors or Transformation Boost, so he can be a very useful leader for this as well, because Terrifying Conquerors covers most of the Wicked Bloodline and like Ginyu Force and stuff like that, Turles, Raditz, those kind of characters. So his leader skill can be pretty good, and when you are facing multiple enemies, which obviously we will be for the first 2 fights, he supports Terrifying Conquerors. So a lot of those characters that he wouldn't normally be supporting in the events where we have one enemy, he'll be supporting them in this stage, so that will be quite useful. And obviously his Easy A, very, very good. Again, he's not the kind of unit that, like, turn 1, let's say you have him in slot 3, even if he, like, double supers, if he then eats a super attack and you don't have an item active, he's potentially going to take a lot of damage, but he's still going to be very, very useful on the team. So then next up we have Bardock. So this is the thing, Space Traveling Warriors is one of those categories where there is a pretty decent mix of super and extreme units. So Bardock, obviously released not super long ago on Global, beginning of March. His leader skill, Goku Family or Storied Figures. There are a few Goku Family units that are not part of like the Bardock stuff, and then Storied Figures includes all of the Team Bardock units. So you can basically run a team with this Bardock that is largely the Team Bardock characters, not only the free-to-play ones, but we have some of the decent summonable ones, and then obviously the Raditz units will be on this leader skill as well, because they are Goku family, and then they'll be getting the 200% lead because of Pure Saiyans. So this guy can obviously be super useful for the simple fact that he has the Scouter effect for 5 turns. However, you have to have a Goku on the team, which I think, looking back at the list, are there actually any Gokus on Space Traveling Warriors? Because obviously Goku Ginyu doesn't count. I don't think there are actually any at all, are there? Well, no, there's not a single Goku. So Bardock, whilst his team can be good, and he himself is quite good, you can't get his Scouter effect, basically, at all. So that does remove one of the things about him that is very powerful, but the unit himself is still very good. The leader skill is very good. If you're going to run a build of Bardock's team, I would probably just use him as a 3rd slot floater, because he's not having that Scouter ability. And then obviously if you pick up the Rainbow Orbs, he can still be very effective at dealing out damage and having pretty decent post super attack defense. If you have other Team Bardock units on the team, he has the active skill that you can use on turn 3. That does a decent amount of damage and guaranteed crit. So I would build the team, if you are going to use him, make sure you have other Team Bardock units, because then you can use that active skill on turn 3, and that could potentially be a finisher for the stage. So then we have Raditz himself, our boy, the superstar of 2022 Dokkan Fest exclusives. He leads Saiyan Saga or Pure Saiyans, and then has Space Traveling Warriors as his extra 30%. So his team will be kind of similar to Bardock's, with mostly Pure Saiyans. There's a few Saiyan Saga units that don't fit on Bardock's leader skill that can go on there as well. So this guy's lead can be pretty decent. He does do an AoE super attack, although his attacks aren't exactly crazy powerful. He does get a guaranteed crit after he receives an attack. So if you are using items, you can put him in slot 1, throw up a defensive item. He gets hit, AoEs, crits everybody. He does get extra defense when there are multiple enemies as well. So that is pretty useful. And then he gets 2 ki for the rest of the battle after delivering a final blow. It's not very common for him, but he can be somewhat useful, right? And then if he's received 3 attacks and there's only 1 enemy, he has the active skill. This can be useful again as a finisher. Like if you have used him as a slot 1 unit, then you get down to 1 enemy, then you can fire off his active skill. His active skill does a guaranteed stun. So again, something that could be very useful against Kid Buu in the final fight. Next up we have Captain Ginyu. So Captain Ginyu leads Terrifying Conquerors or Planet Namek Saga with Space Traveling Warriors as his extra 30%. So you can build a team like the full Ginyu Force. There's a couple of other Planet Namek Saga characters that are on Space Traveling Warriors like Full Power Frieza, the 3rd form Frieza to support. That can be a decent rotation if you are using defensive items. So this guy can be pretty good. The Ginyu Force team, obviously, still pretty powerful. Has some good options for Super Battle Road. If you have the most optimal build of the Ginyu Force with all the side banner units like Rakuman Guldo and Jason Berta, that team can obviously be very effective. So then we have this guy. We're going to start talking about some units that we can use actually on the teams. So this Giant 8 Vegeta, he fits onto a couple of the 200% leads that we've talked about, and is obviously just on the general Space Traveling Warriors team. If he gets hit in slot 1, he gets a bunch of extra ki, which makes it easier for him to get his 18 ki super, because his 18 ki super is the AoE, does mega colossal damage to all enemies. So he can actually dish out quite a lot of damage. He has guard, so he's another unit that, like, especially in the first fight against the 5 Kais, if you throw up a defensive item and put him in slot 1, he's going to AoE and do a pretty significant amount of damage to all of the enemies. He's got, obviously, some of these Saiyan links. His links are a bit weird, so when it comes to units like Raditz and Bardock and stuff, he's not going to share tons of links with them, but we can get a couple of links active, like Saiyan Warrior Race, Shattering the Limit. That's basically it, actually. Legendary Power if we are bringing some other LRs, but he can be pretty good. And of course, you have access to this guy, who is a really good partner for him to go in slot 2, who also has an AoE super that you only need to get the 12 ki. Now, this unit is pretty old now, as we can see here, right? The unit is 3 years old. they will take a lot of damage if they're taking hits, especially with no items active. But the combo of Great Ape Vegeta in slot 1 and them in slot 2, and then firing off double AoEs, like, you're going to do a lot of damage to all of the enemies. So these guys are obviously more effective in the first 2 fights. I mean, it doesn't really matter, I suppose, that they're doing an AoE when there's only one enemy. And the Great Ape Vegeta does at least have type advantage over the Kid Buu. I guess you could deliberately go for his 12 key super when you're against Kid Buu, and you don't have to worry about key as much. But these guys can be a pretty decent combo. Then we have the Turle Army. So these guys, unfortunately, because they have the rest of Team Turles with them, they're not on Pure Saiyan. So in terms of the units that we've covered so far in the leader skills, they're going to be run either under Terrifying Conquerors, movie bosses, or just the straight up Space Traveling Warriors. But these guys can be really good, right? They have a chance to stun on both of their supers. If you go into the second or third fight already below the HP threshold, you can use their active skill straight away on turn 1, and it can be used twice as well. It gives them a guaranteed 24 key, which gives them effective against all types and a high chance to launch an additional super. So these guys can be very useful, probably as more of a third slot floating unit because their defense has aged a little bit, but as I said at the beginning, having stunners on this team can be very, very useful. And then, of course, their ideal partner, AGL Turles, still pretty good with his Easy A. It's only the first fight where you have super enemies, so he'll be giving the defensive buff as well as attack. But he has the chance to stun on super. He's giving everybody all the attack support. And then if you're below 80% HP, he has the chance to transform, which again, you could get that straight away going into the second or third fight. And then once he transforms, he has the high chance to stun on super, still gives allies key, but gives quite a big boost to himself in terms of his overall damage output and defense, as well as giving you a nice chunky heal as well of 20%. So definitely very effective, very good unit. And because he is a pure Saiyan, like, he fits on a couple of the teams that we've talked about, including Raditz, right? So he can be very, very good on the team with his Easy A. Next up we have LR Bardock. So this is a guy probably a bit more useful for the Bardock team specifically, or obviously Raditz's team. He'll get the 200% leader skill as well. He seals on his 18 key super, so that is obviously an ability still very, very effective for Super Battle Road. When you're facing multiple enemies, he gets 4 extra key as well as a big chunk of extra defense, so that is pretty useful. Against one enemy he gets a bit more key, but he only gets extra attack. But he still can be very, very useful for this, even against the Kid Buu. The sealing obviously going to be very effective for any turns where the enemy is not stunned, like your units didn't get their stuns to actually go off. At least sealing is guaranteed, and that's going to be very, very effective here. So for some other Team Bardock type units, we obviously have the Tora, who was the side banner unit for the Tech Bardock. Very, very good for supporting that team. He kind of relies on a very specific Team Bardock like team build, but then he can be very good, right? He has built-in dodge, built-in damage reduction. He's giving support to the Team Bardock units. If there's an ally whose name includes Bardock in the turn, he's giving 60% support to those units. So he can be very, very good. I wouldn't put him in slot 1, even though he has the Raise Allies super attack, unless you're throwing up a defensive item and then just kind of relying on the dodge. But I guess his dodge plus his built-in damage reduction with an extra item factored in like a Whis, even if he doesn't dodge, he's not really going to take any damage unless it's from a super. So he can definitely be very good for the actual Team Bardock type build of the Space Traveling Warriors team, as well as the Farsha, who can be a very, very good slot 1 unit. She has guard for 4 turns. Each time she gets hit, she's building up her attacks. Building up her defense and attack, so her stats can actually get quite high. On Bardock's team, like double tech Bardock's, when she's built up and there's support, like say Int Tora on the rotation, I've had her hit like over 10 million attack. So she can be very, very good if you want to go for the Bardock team build. And obviously there's the free-to-play versions of all the Team Bardock units as well. The Farsha can dodge, has attack lowering, supports when she dodges. I think it's Borgos can stun and gets a guaranteed additional attack when there's multiple enemies. So the free-to-play Team Bardock units can fit in quite nicely as well. We also have the B-Pan. Now, B-Pan, she's aged to the point where she will take damage from attacks, especially supers, but she has the chance to stun on her super, and she heals you based on the damage that she does. So if she comes onto rotation, even if you're floating her in slot 3, you get a turn where she does like a double super, then she's potentially stunning the enemy and giving you a ton of healing. And because she is a Goku family unit, she will be on Bardock's leader skill, even though it's only the 170, because obviously she's not a pure Saiyan. So you could actually run her on Bardock's team, or any of the Space Traveling Warriors setups. She's not really on any of the other ones, because obviously as a super unit, she's not on Terrifying Conquerors, Movie Bosses, any of those kind of teams. But if you're just running straight up Space Traveling Warriors with Bojack, or you're running Bardock, then she can be a pretty useful unit for the healing and the stuns. And we have a couple of other random honourable mentions. This Jace, even if you're not running the Ginyu Force build and you're just running general Space Traveling Warriors or Terrifying Conquerors, this guy can be pretty useful because he supports extreme allies and has the Scouter effect. So that can be very, very useful to know exactly where the super attack is, obviously. His defense not the greatest, especially if you don't have another Ginyu Force ally on the team. So I would recommend, if you are going to use him, at least using one other Ginyu Force unit. But you can use units like the LR, the free-to-play LR Ginyu Force, the physical or the tech, because they can be decent support units, and then they count as a Ginyu Force ally for this guy getting his extra defense. And then a couple of other random honourable mention units. We have this STR Hit. We've talked about quite a few extreme STR units. I know a lot of people never summoned on these type support banners, but if you have him and you are running a bunch of extreme STR units, he's going to be very useful. 50% support, changes orbs to STR, he can stun, he raises defense on super, so he can be pretty good. If you're not running many extreme STR units, though, I probably wouldn't run him. But the other hits are all on here as well. The only problem is they don't really fit on a lot of the categories we've talked about, right? Just the straight up Space Traveling Warriors team. Then we have King Vegeta. We talked about a couple of teams he can be on, including Pure Saiyans and Terrifying Conquerors. He supports Pure Saiyans. If all allies in the turn are on Pure Saiyans, he has a chance to stun from his passive. So teams like the Raditz team, he can be pretty good for in providing that support to Pure Saiyans. He also lowers attack, which can be very useful as well. So a pretty decent free-to-play option. And then I thought I'd mention this guy if you are running any of the Movie Bosses or Terrifying Conquerors, anything like that, where you can use these coolers. The Tech Final Form cooler is actually pretty decent, right? He can get decent stats. He has a chance to stun. He has a built-in chance to launch an additional super. If you do stun the enemy, he gets a guaranteed crit with the additional, which can be pretty good. There isn't an ally whose enemy whose name includes Goku on any of the stages, so you can't get the guaranteed stun, but he can be pretty good as well. He clashes, obviously, with the LR cooler in terms of links because they have the same name, but he can be very useful on that team as well. So there you go. Those are the top picks and honourable mentions for a Space Traveling Warriors team. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section. Like I said at the beginning, if there's any units you think I missed or should have talked more about, let me know down below. And let me know what your team build is going to look like for Space Traveling Warriors Super Battle Road. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Masked Ningen. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the links down below for the Discord and the merch store, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.